Do you want a tank that can look like this in 18 months' time, but you just don't have a lot of money? You've come to the right place. The startup costs for this system were less than $500 in total, and it grew corals like weeds. Today we're going to talk about how to become a successful reefer without a lot of money, and maybe just a little bit of luck. Welcome back to the channel, folks. As usual, if you like the content I'm working hard on, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really does help me out. Today we're going to cover 5 strategies to get you set up with a budget build, but not just any budget build, a build that can also be successful at growing corals, and it can in turn support you as you work towards that dream build or as you strive to upgrade equipment and get some of those bells and whistles that you desire. Now here are the 5 strategies we're going to cover today. Number 1, buy used. Number 2, buy big enough. Number 3, buy proven. 4, sacrifice the bells and whistles. And today we're going to talk about alternatives to those bells and whistles. And number 5 is choose the right corals, because doing so will help you with maintenance costs and get you the funds that you need for that dream tank you're hoping for in the near future. Okay, strategy 1, buy used. Here's the same tank that you saw in the opening clip, but early on, before the corals had grown in, I picked up this oceanic 90-gallon tank used. It included a sump and refugium for only $100. That's right, super cheap. I was in graduate school, I didn't have a lot of money, I wanted to get in the hobby as I found it was nice to focus on something else besides school. It wasn't the prettiest tank, right? The stand was actually quite ugly, as you can see here, so I had to sacrifice in some areas, but it held water, and it had the right components to get me started. It was very basic. The sump was a simple 20-gallon tank. The refugium was a drilled 10-gallon tank. So simple. Now what I did was I joined my local reef club, found out where used equipment was being sold, and quickly picked this system up. So the key to starting out in this hobby to save some funds is buying used. Go check out Reef to Reef or other forums. There's an incredible amount of equipment out there that can be had for much cheaper. Partly it's because there's just so much turnover in the hobby. So capitalize off that. Now when you're buying your glass box, so your tank, if you can, take an experienced person with you. Or at the very least, request the tank be full of water when you arrive, and closely inspect those seams for expansion bubbles. Now the great thing about buying used equipment is if you take care of it, you can typically resell the stuff for nearly the same price you paid for it, and sometimes more if you dive in on a lot type sale. The number 2 strategy is to buy big enough. This budget build tank was 90 gallons. In short, I had a 100+ gallon system for only $100. So you need adequate water volume for stability and to increase your chances of success. Try not to be tempted to sink funds into a nice new little nano system that has very little water volume. To get in this hobby and be successful where you're actually cutting and selling corals to help pay for the maintenance of the tank, you'll need some water volume. I'd recommend a display tank that is 75 to 90 gallons in size. It's an adequate size to support stability, and it's not overly too large where maintenance costs can go up. So in short, you can still get away with your basic 5-gallon bucket water change when owning a 90-gallon tank. And you'll also want adequate water volume for stability, as you'll see that some of the equipment I used wasn't as foolproof as what you can buy on the market for top dollar. So that little extra water volume allows for those errors and is more forgiving when running a budget build. Alright, strategy number 3, buy proven. You've got to try to accept that you don't need those Ecotech LED light fixtures to succeed. I hope that this video helps with that. Focus on budgetary items that are proven. I ran a cheap $150 T5 Catalina light fixture. It didn't have active cooling. It did have individual reflectors, which I knew was needed to achieve sufficient light intensity. But I had to make a sacrifice. I had to get this light fixture. It's actually intended to be used in horticulture, but it worked out fine. I even ended up adding a DIY kind of blue LED light strip to it. So the par, as you can see here, it wasn't amazing, but you don't need all that much par. I achieved really great growth with these par values. So if you're doing a budget build, I'd recommend sticking actually with T5s. They're plug and play, they just work. They provide a blanket of light. I ran bulbs for 16 to 18 months before changing them out without issue. I'll show you how you can work up towards that LED fixture that you're wishing for, but in today's reefing community, you can pick up probably a used ATI 6 bulb T5 light fixture for nearly how much I paid for my Catalina. And it will grow corals better than almost any other light out there. Strategy number 4 is to sacrifice the bells and whistles. You'll notice in this particular tank, I ran simple Coralia pumps. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. No controller, no wave making going on, nothing fancy at all was going on. Just plug them in and let them run. They are cheap, they are reliable, they get the job done. Other sacrifices I made, this is a little embarrassing. I actually dosed 2-part my alkalinity and my calcium with cheap aqua lifter pumps. So that's pretty crazy, right? So I just simply timed how long it took to run the pumps to dose my needed amounts, and the tank did just fine. As a reminder though, back to strategy number 2, I had adequate water volume, so I had a little bit more forgiveness going on there. So be careful with that. So I'm sure, if you wanted to do a nano tank, hey, just dose by hand. That's fine too. Refugium lighting, I just used cheap Home Depot LED light bulbs. It grew my Chaeto incredibly fast. My skimmer was very, very old and very, very used. It was an ASM G1 protein skimmer that I picked up for $100. I modded the impeller, so some of you old timers may know about that. And the skimmer did just fine. It aerated the water for me, which is good. Pulled out a little bit of crap, here and there. But overall, this tank had no real automation, no controller. My success was due to daily monitoring and having a fish buddy come over when I was out of town. Now, is this the best way to run a tank? No, I don't think so. Controllers and some automation I think is great. But remember, I'm showing you how to start a budget build that will get you to a better place in 1 to 2 years after jumping into this hobby. Now, the last strategy I want to cover that will allow you to have a successful budget build with a goal to get a dream tank or some of those bells and whistles in the near future is strategy number 5, choose the right corals. For your budget build, you want to leverage your corals and the growth you can achieve to help pay for salt, maintenance, equipment upgrades, and that next tank. So I chose corals that were in demand in my area. I felt, these corals would always be in demand. Those classics, right? Those corals that most everyone wants. I also chose corals that were fast growing, but also required a little bit of expertise. You don't want to be stuck with only a bunch of starter corals to frag and sell. This purple digi grew like a weed. I sold $5 frags all the time. My Duncan colony grew incredibly well, and I sold well over probably 75 frags of this coral. Sometimes they were just single head, 2 head, multiple heads. Over the course of 6 to 8 months, I probably made back, a great deal of money with this Duncan coral. So the Duncan coral was a money maker for me. And people just love Duncans. They have good color, good movement, they look alive, so they're great. They're great to have. My candy cane frag grew very well. I sold heads of it all the time with great success. And lastly, this ORA Hawkins, this SPS coral, it's a classic. People love the Hawkins. It grew incredibly well for me. Without a lot of par. I frequently cut and sold frags of it. It's one of those classics, right? Many love to have in their tanks. So it was a good decision to purchase that coral and keep it and grow it out. Now with time, let's say 12 to 18 months, your corals will grow out, you'll be fragging and selling, and you'll make a little bit of money for those equipment upgrades. For example, after selling some frags, one of the first things I bought was a Reef Keeper Lite, which was a controller. I don't even know if they have this controller anymore, I don't think. But it was a controller. I also upgraded my Aqualifter pumps to BRS dosing pumps to help with my 2-part. So that was a little better. I sold off the Coralia pumps and picked up my first Ecotech pumps with controllers. Got some wave making action going on. I got rid of the cheap Catalina light fixture and instead picked up an ATI T5 fixture with a Reef Bright blue LED strip, which to this day is a very nice light combination. And lastly, prior to that Oceanic 90-gallon tank hitting the 2-year mark, it was sold off. And within days, I had in my apartment a brand new custom rimless tank that cost me nearly $900 just for the tank. So a lot more, an upgrade for me, a dream tank of sorts at the time. Now I must confess, I don't think these upgrades, these changes made the health of my corals any better, to be honest. They did make my life a little easier to some extent, and it was nice to have shiny new things and a pretty tank on the outside, but in some ways keeping these things simple, using that budget build, it really brought me a lot of great success. It taught me how to monitor the tank without all the automation. So in closing, don't be afraid to start a budget build with used gear. Make sure you have enough water volume though, and know that you can have success with the budget build, and your dream tank and that upgraded equipment will be in reach sooner than you think, even if you don't have a lot of money or funding. You can use those corals to sell and frag and get you to a good spot actually pretty quickly. So thanks again folks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, and we will see you all in the next one. Take care and happy reefing.